Hello and welcome back to Psychology with Mr. Snyder. Today we are diving into our biology unit, and first we're going to be talking about the nervous system. So let's review your learning targets. Your first goal is to illustrate the divisions of the nervous system. We're going to analyze neurons, or break them down and how they work, and talk about their components. We're going to talk about the neurotransmitters, or the chemicals that travel between neurons, and we're going to analyze the peripheral nervous system and what that controls. So your first goal and your first learning target is to literally illustrate this nervous system and its divisions. If you want to pause so you can write this down under number 1, go ahead. I'll wait for you. Anyway, the two basic components of the nervous system are the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is easy. That's your brain, and it's connected to your spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, however, focuses on the autonomic system, which is your involuntary muscles, like your heart or your stomach that digests. You don't have to tell your heart to beat. You don't have to tell your stomach to digest. You don't have to tell yourself to breathe. It just happens. It's automatic, autonomic system. The somatic system is the voluntary muscles and sense organs that we use: fingers, eyes, nose, ears, those sorts of things. And then two parts of the autonomic are the parasympathetic. This is kind of our that calms our bodies after emergencies, or kind of calms us down. The sympathetic system prepares our body for action. So that's the fight or flight phenomenon that we use. Are we going to fight the danger, or are we going to run away from it? And when the danger is over, the parasympathetic system calms it down. Let's discuss in Learning Target 2, neurons. Neurons are the nerve systems that connect this peripheral nervous system, central nervous system, and the rest of the body together. They are what hold us together. You have billions of these in your brain alone. The components of a neuron. Well, the cell body is the thing in the middle that produces energy. It's kind of the nucleus of the neuron. And if I were to show you a picture, the cell body is right here. Okay, and these little things hanging off of it, these little tree branches, are dendrites. And dendrites are the things that start off. They receive the information from another neuron and pass it on to the cell body. It then moves through the cell body down the axon. The axon is this long tail, and the white, sort of yellowish, fatty substance around it is called myelin. And this is a myelin sheath. And the myelin sheath helps to speed up the work of the neurons, and it actually acts as an insulator, because if we didn't have a myelin sheath, our brains would just end up frying themselves, because the circuits would get all messed up. And the axon terminals are at the end. These little finger button things here. Here's the axon terminal. It is full of neurotransmitters, and we have different types of neurotransmitters that we'll go over later. But it crosses the gap in between here called the synapse. The synapse is the gap in between this axon terminal of the messaging neuron and the dendrite of the receiving neuron. And so those are the parts of the neuron. Neuroplasticity is actually the term that is used when we change our neurons. If you break your arm, or if you have a damage to your brain, your neurons will actually automatically network around that injury so that you don't lose any mobility. So just to review, messages in the form of chemicals and electricity enter the neurons through these dendrites, go to the cell body, travel down the axon, and then they're sent through the axon terminals to the dendrite of the receiving neuron, and this happens over and over and over, billions of times. Everything we do happens in this process. So how do neurons communicate? Well, they are messages sent through the process we just described over the synapse to the next axon terminal. Messages only travel in one direction. They enter the dendrites, they travel through the cell body and the axon to the terminals, and they cross the synapses to the next dendrite. That's it. That's how it works. That is how the messages travel. One direction, not the music group. Very simple. What are neurotransmitters? Working on our next learning target. They are actually chemicals stored in the sacs at the bottom of the axon terminals. And when a neuron fires or it sends a message, it releases neurotransmitters. And that message is converted from the chemical into an electrical impulse that then travels through the neuron to release the next chemical. The message is then transmitted until it arrives at its destination in that same process. There are several kinds of different neurotransmitters. The two that we will talk about are acetylcholine, which is involved in the control of muscles and in learning and memory, and dopamine, which is involved primarily in motor behavior. A lot of these neurotransmitters are involved in different aspects. Serotonin is involved in sleep, but it's also involved in staying awake, and it's also involved in anxiety. That's how a lot of these drugs work, is that if we have too much anxiety, it's usually too much serotonin being released. And so the drugs work on this molecular level to block the serotonin from reaching the next neuron, and it calms a person down. And those are what we call SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. We already drew that in Learning Target 1, so we don't need to go over it again, but that is the central nervous system. Very simple. For our last learning target, we're going to talk about the peripheral nervous system. How is it structured? You already saw it in Learning Target 1. It consists of the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. So the somatic nervous system sends the messages to the central nervous system. These are your voluntary muscles and organs. If you raise your arm in the air right now, that is your somatic nervous system working. It's telling your arm and your voluntary muscles and sense organs to lift your arm in the air. If you put your hand in cold water and feel that it is cold, that are your sensory neurons activating and telling your brain that your hand is in cold water. This is activated by pain, changes in temperature, changes in body position, touch. That's the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is more automatic. Things like heartbeat, breathing, your blood pressure is automatic, digestion. And again, it has two divisions: the sympathetic nervous system that reacts to stress, and the parasympathetic nervous system that calms the body down back to peace and normality. And that is the end of today's lesson. Hopefully it was informational to you, and I can't wait to get more into our next section, the brain. See you later.